Chapter 19. The Goods Market in an Open Economy. Chapter 19 extends the goods market studied in Chapter 3 to account for openness in the analysis of goods markets. You saw in Chapter 18 how a recession in the US in 2007 to 2009 led to a world recession. Learning objectives. Understand determination of equilibrium in the goods market for an open economy. Show the effects of domestic shocks and foreign shocks on the domestic economy's output and trade balance. Look at the effects of a real depreciation on output and trade balance. Learning objectives. Understand the alternative description of equilibrium that shows the close connection among saving, investment, and the trade balance. In equation 19.1, the term C plus I plus G constitutes the domestic demand for goods. In a closed economy, this is also equal to the demand for domestic goods. But in an open economy, some of the demand for domestic goods comes from abroad, and some of the domestic demand falls on imports. So exports must be added in and imports must be subtracted to calculate the demand for domestic goods. However, in case of imports, we simply cannot subtract the quantity of imports. The real exchange rate allows us to calculate the price of domestic goods in terms of foreign goods. In order to convert the value of imports in terms of domestic goods, we must multiply IM by 1 over epsilon. Equation 19.2 says, imports depend positively on domestic income Y and also positively on the real exchange rate epsilon. Equation 19.3 says exports depend positively on foreign income Y star and negatively on the real exchange rate epsilon. Figure 19-1A plots domestic demand for goods against output holding constant all other variables: interest rates, taxes, government spending, foreign output, and the real exchange rate that affect demand. Increase in output increases demand, but less than 1 for 1. Slope of DD line is less than 1. Figure 19-1B shows domestic demand for domestic goods by subtracting imports. Since imports are an increasing function of output, distance between DD and AA increases. Line AA flatter than DD. AA shows domestic demand for domestic goods increases as income increases. Figure 19-1C adds in exports to get demand for domestic goods shown by line ZZ. Exports depend on foreign income, so they are constant and do not change with change in domestic income. ZZ is also flatter than DD. Figure 19-1D is derived from figure 19-1C and shows the relation of net exports to output. For example, at output level Y, exports are equal to the distance AC and imports are equal to the distance AB. Thus, net exports are equal to the distance given by BC. Distance between the lines AA and ZZ gives exports, and distance between the lines AA and DD gives imports. Where lines DD and ZZ cross, there is trade balance. Net exports are 0 at any output level to the left of the point where the lines DD and ZZ cross. When ZZ is above DD, there is a trade surplus. Anywhere to the right, there is a trade deficit. Distance between the lines DD and ZZ gives us net exports at each level of output. Net exports shown by the line NX are negatively related to output since imports are an increasing function of output and exports remain constant. In equilibrium, production, output, must be equal to demand for domestic goods. Equation 19.4 states the equilibrium condition in the open economy, leaving out expectation variables introduced in chapters 14 through 17. This is the IS relation in an open economy. Figure 19-2A shows equilibrium level of output is given by the point where the 45-degree line intersects the demand function ZZ, point A. At this level of output Y, Figure 19-2b shows there is a trade deficit equal to BC. We could have a trade surplus or trade balance at the equilibrium level of output. Figure 19-3 shows effective increase in domestic demand on domestic output and the trade balance in an open economy. Figure 19-3a shows increase in government spending G increases equilibrium output. The ZZ curve shifts up to ZZ prime. New equilibrium point is A prime and new equilibrium output is higher at Y prime. Figure 19-3b shows that it makes the trade balance worse off. Note that the NX curve does not shift. So an expansionary fiscal policy used to get the economy out of a recession will worsen the budget deficit and the trade deficit. Also, the multiplier will be smaller, so output will increase by less than it would in a closed economy. The reason is that some of the increase in income leads to increase in imports rather than demand for domestic goods. Figure 19-4 shows the effects of an increase in foreign demand on domestic output and the trade balance. Increase in foreign demand leads to an upward shift of ZZ curve due to increase in exports. Equilibrium output increases. At the same time, since exports are a function of foreign output but imports are not, the net exports curve shifts up from NX to NX prime at each level of output, so the trade balance is better at each level of output. At the new equilibrium level of output, imports will also be higher, but still we see that trade balance will be better than before because of higher exports. Line DD is below ZZ prime at the new equilibrium output level Y prime, showing a trade surplus compared to trade balance before. Note, line DD has been drawn in this graph to show what happens to net exports by comparing it to ZZ prime. We need the DD line since in this case the NX curve has shifted. Thus, increase in foreign output increases domestic output and improves the trade balance. The effects of depreciation on output and trade balance. The effect will be the same as the effect of increase in foreign output. Depreciation will lead to an increase in domestic output and an improvement in the trade balance. Depreciation makes our exports cheaper and imports more expensive. Thus, net exports and domestic output increase. The Marshall-Lerner condition is met so that depreciation leads to an improvement in the trade balance. When real exchange rate goes down, exports increase and imports decrease, but 1 over epsilon increases, that is, the price of imports increases. Net exports are X minus Im over epsilon. Marshall-Lerner conditions are such that when real depreciation occurs, exports increase and imports decrease enough to compensate for the increase in price of imports so that net exports increase. In reality, Marshall-Lerner conditions are met. Figure 19-5 shows if output is at the natural level and government wants to reduce the trade deficit without changing output, it can do so by using the right combination of depreciation and decrease in government spending. Depreciation will shift up the net exports curve NX to NX prime and the ZZ curve up to ZZ prime. Trade balance would improve, but output would be higher. Trade deficit decreases from BC to the amount given by the line INX prime corresponding to the higher output Y prime. If government wants to keep output at its natural level as before, it should decrease G to shift demand back to ZZ. This way, output will return to the natural level and trade balance will be better. It will go from a trade deficit to a trade balance of 0. Table 19-1 shows fiscal policy and exchange rate policy can be used in combination to achieve desired goals. If initial output is low and there is a trade surplus, increase in G will increase output and lower the trade surplus. Government may need to complement this with an increase or decrease in real exchange rate. If trade surplus goes down a lot or output does not increase enough, government may want a real depreciation of the currency. If on the other hand, trade surplus worsens just a little and output increases a lot, they may combine increase in G with a real appreciation of the currency. Figure 19-6 shows depreciation may initially lead to increase in import bills due to higher prices of imports. So net exports will worsen for some time. Then as quantities of exports go up and quantity of imports go down, trade balance will improve. Looks like J, first going down and then up. Figure 19-7 shows substantial lag in effect of real appreciation or depreciation on the trade deficit. This lag has been estimated to be from 6 months to a year. The lag is also evident in the way depreciation affects output. So real depreciation may decrease output and make the trade deficit worse initially. Equation 19.5 gives us an important relation between saving, investment, and the current account. It says current account balance is equal to saving, sum of private saving and public saving, minus investment. This is an alternate way of expressing the equilibrium condition in the goods market. A current account surplus implies that the country is saving more than it invests. A current account deficit implies that the country is saving less than it invests. Thus, it is borrowing from the rest of the world. Note the implications of equation 19.5. 1. An increase in investment must be reflected either in an increase in private saving or public saving or a deterioration of the current account balance. 2. A deterioration of the government budget balance must be reflected in an increase in either private saving or in a decrease in investment, or else a deterioration of the current account balance. 3. A country with a high saving rate, private plus government, must either have a high investment rate or a large current account surplus. Figure 1 traces the origins and implications of the current account deficit that the US has since the 1980s. This deficit reflects low saving rather than high investment. This is not good. If increase in current account deficit was due to increase in investment, it would be good for the long run. In order to reduce the current account deficit, it seems dollar must depreciate to increase demand through increase in net exports rather than through fiscal policy. Figure 2 shows, since the crisis, private savings have increased, but government savings have been decreasing. All this indicates that current account deficit will continue unless the rest of the world stops lending or a real depreciation occurs.